Hello there and welcome. My name is Alicia McNaughton and I'm so glad you decided to learn how to build a magic Christmas box. My amazingly talented mom taught me how to make these wonderful magical gifts about 23 years ago, and I never get tired of watching the absolute amazement and delight that comes across people's faces as they watch the magic of Christmas unfolding before their eyes. I hope it's a loving tribute to her memory, and it's a great privilege for me to bring this amazing little pastime to you and your family. So let's get started. We're going to take this ordinary little piece of foam core and turn it into that. This is a lovely product. It's nice and lightweight. It's easy to cut. It's very easy to work with. There should be a diagram in your PDF printable version of these instructions that lays out these measurements really precisely for you. So I want you to go ahead and transfer those measurements, lay out your floor and your first two walls and your other walls and the pieces for the top of the box. Don't forget, we're not going to cut these walls off this floor and these two walls. We're just going to cut halfway through this foam core, and then those walls will fold up into place and stay attached to the floor, and that's going to be the beginning of the main frame of the Magic Christmas box. So now that we're all measured up and ready to go, I use one of these very sharp little miniature box cutters. You can snap the tip off every time you want it to be nice and sharp. It's great to have a nice sharp blade, and it's also great to have a nice metal straight edge. Otherwise, if it's wood or plastic, your nice sharp blade tends to get stuck in the side of it. So we're going to lay it right along here. We've got a couple of nice long straight lines. We're just going to start, we're going to cut out just from here. We don't want to cut this piece that's up here. The very first pass I make is just going to make me a nice little groove that my blade will stay in. Just gently create a little groove. And then again, a little bit more deeply. You can feel the foam, the little styrofoam in the middle between the two pieces of poster board is very soft and very easy to cut through. So you can actually feel where we're cutting about halfway through it now. And then the last pass we make, we'll go right through to the bottom and cut that nice and cleanly there like that. Great, so now that you've cut out all your pieces, the top and the top sides are ready to go. This is the one we're going to work with now. If you have accidentally cut these walls off, there is a way to attach them later, and I can show you how to do that. But the main thing is you've cut off this tiny little piece right here. Cut this little cutaway piece, and then we're going to take this piece and lay it down on its face side. So turn it over if you've just finished cutting it out. Take your straight edge, and you'll be able to see where the lines are. This line here that extends all the way along, lay your straight edge right up against that side there, and I'm only going to cut halfway through my foam core. First, I'm going to cut the top layer of poster paper, just gently like that. Maybe one more time to get through that little piece of paper. And honestly, you'll be able to feel when your knife goes through the soft piece of styrofoam in the middle, you'll feel that the poster paper on the other side is quite a bit more dense. And so you'll just be able to tell that you're just cutting through the styrofoam. And if you've done it right, it should just go like that. And then it'll be standing into place. We're going to do that for the other one and fold it up into place as well. It has happened to me many, many times. I've gotten a little carried away, I've started cutting pieces off, and I've cut these walls completely away from the floor and the main frame. So I'm just going to show you really quickly. This is some really nice strong fabric tape. You can use duct tape, you can use whatever you think is going to be strong enough. Stick it back down there where it's supposed to be and carry on from there. Okay, now at this point, we're going to lay out and cut out the pieces of our poster board. This is pretty ordinary poster paper, but I bought this at an art supply store where I think the weight of it, the density of it, is a little heavier than what you might find at sort of any variety corner store. I'll show you what I mean. We'll just open our magic box for a moment. I'm going to talk about these pop-up walls, kind of like one of those pop-up books or cards, you know. This is a pop-up wall, and this is what we're going to be making out of this poster board. You want to get something that's fairly heavy, fairly good quality, because it has to support itself and stand up here like this. So use the diagram you found in your companion guide for your poster board. We call them inner walls and subfloors. This wall is still attached to the subfloor that's underneath the carpeting right there. I found this really heavy art board. I think it's the matting for a photography or art framing business. It came from the art supply store as well. So I have used this very heavy board to make the outside piece. I haven't given you a diagram in your companion guide for that piece. All you need to cut out from here is 7 3/4 by 7 3/4, two of them, one for this back side and one for this back side, that we're going to attach to the back of our inner walls. So now we're ready to lay out our fabric and cut out all the pieces we need for the exterior fabric wrapping of our Magic Christmas box. These pieces here are our little pop-up wall, the back side of those walls that come folding out. We want the back of those walls to be wrapped in the same fabric we're using for the whole exterior of the box. These will be our freestanding walls, and they'll be attached to that main frame of the box. This is our main frame that we have folded together, and these are all the pieces for our box top. Make sure when you're cutting out your fabric for your box top, you leave enough here so that the fabric can come up the outside of the sides of the box and also down the inside of the sides of the top. I have this other piece of fabric over here, which I bought just to show you. This is lovely fabric, and it was very tempting to buy this. However, it has a very definite directionality. If you use that kind of fabric, it's going to give you a headache, because it's very difficult to make sure that all of the pieces end up facing the right direction. So I tend to use a fabric that can go any which way it wants to. So we're just going to start right over here, leave at least 1.5 inches outside the edge of the fabric so that you can fold it over and wrap it to the inside later on. Okay, now we're going to start assembling our pieces. This is the kind of glue I use because it doesn't have a great deal of water in it. A lot of the craft glues, a lot of the school glues that you can use have too much water. And we want to be careful not to introduce too much water because we're basically working with paper and fabric. And every time we get our paper wet, it tends to sort of twist and bend out of shape. So I use a glue that doesn't have a lot of water content. I might add a little water to it to thin it down to make it more spreadable. But to start with, I always just give myself a nice little puddle of glue. I keep it right upside down like that. And I'm just going to dab the end of my paintbrush into that little glue. Run a little bead of glue right along this edge. It's going to come up and meet the back of wall number 1. I've got my handy little pin keeper over here, and I'm just going to attach these pins on an angle. Putting the pins on an angle will also help to hold your pieces together. And I'm going to set that aside to dry, and we'll come back to it in just a minute. Okay, so now we're ready to assemble the top of the box. Very much the same way that our walls kind of got attached to the main frame of the box in sort of a pinwheel with that little bit of overhang extending beyond the wall next door. We're going to do the same thing with the top of the box. Run our little line of glue. This glue is great because it dries really quickly. It's also great because it rinses off with plain water. If you make a mistake, you just wipe it clean, start over. Now I'm going to put a little bead of glue right along the edge of this wall and right along the bottom edge of this top side. We're going to bump those right up against one another here in this corner. Little pin in there, snug against that top little pin in there to hold that one in place, and just carry on around. So now it's time to choose some interior wallpaper. This is going to become the interior wall of the main frame of the box. We're going to attach this right inside those two pieces we assembled earlier. And so we're going to cut out some fabric. Remember that you're designing 3 rooms of a house, so choose whatever you like. I've got several different fabrics here. This fabric here is going to become the wallpaper for this room. This is the pop-up wall. Choose whatever you like. If you like dark, dramatic colors, don't be afraid to use them as well. So now we have our L-shaped piece of fabric and our main frame, the first 2 walls that we assembled earlier. I'm going to add just the slightest little bit of water. Be careful with the water. You don't want too much water added to your pieces. If your walls bend out of shape because of the water, it's no fun. I'm putting just the slightest amount of water into my glue, just enough so that it's spreadable like that, so that there's just this nice, thin, soft little buttering of glue, and just a little bit of water added to it, because like I said, this glue dries very quickly, and you don't want, see the first part that I started with over here is already starting to dry out. So it's just nice and damp, and I'm just going to position this. I like the factory edge of my fabric left on over there. It helps me get it nice and square. And we're just going to press it into that corner. These other 2 pieces are going to come up and get attached to those back walls. Lift your box up now and just smooth that. Don't stretch the fabric. Just smooth it nicely so you don't have any air bubbles and no little creases or crinkles in your fabric. Now you'll notice that I often use tiles. I have a whole bunch of ceramic tiles that I got at the building supply place. They're great. They're 8 inches square. They fit perfectly in there. I'm going to pile a bunch of them in there. I do this quite often with almost every little piece. Every time I introduce a little bit of water to this paper, it wants to sort of start bending itself. And so you can use books, you can use cans of soup. I have this lovely little Christmas box that's full of pennies. Anything that you can find around your house, use a big rock. Set it in there and let that sit and dry for just a few minutes. We'll come back to it in a minute. And now we're going to do some interior wallpaper. The littlest bit of water mixed into our glue, just so that I get a nice thin layer. I'm going to show you in a second why it's so important to limit the amount of water that you introduce to this paper. Like any paper, when you get it wet, it starts to bend. We're only going to do half of this interior layer at a time, because I want there to be this fold right here, because eventually I want this to stand up like this. If you were to glue this entire piece of fabric down to this whole inner wall, later on when you folded it back in place, it would have this little pucker. Would be this little extra fabric that would kind of raise up out of the corner. And I don't want that. So I'm just laying that. As you can see, our wall wants to bend and be funny. So once again, I'm going to lay it on the edge of my table, and I'm going to stack a few tiles on top of it, and I'm going to let that sit for an hour, maybe 2. I want it to dry entirely thoroughly so that that wall learns how to be straight. Now this wall is done very much the same way. This is the inner wall of one of our separate rooms, not in the main frame. This is the subfloor that's going to be under the carpeting, and this is the inside layer of the pop-up wall. And the reason I'm showing this to you differently is because we only want to glue the wallpaper down to the bottom of that wall. I'm going to lay this, and as you can see, this is the little factory edge of the fabric. I'm using it sort of almost like a little bit of baseboard trim. This is going to become a pop-up wall. Weight it down with your tiles or your books or your cans of soup or whatever you like and let it dry. So you should be pretty good at gluing fabric to walls by now. We have 2 of these little exterior pop-up pieces. Glue those into place, weight them under something heavy, let them dry. This is our freestanding wall, one of the ones that is going to become a floor, that the pop-up wall is going to be attached to this one. I've already stuck this one in place. I'm going to show you the next step of what to do with this. Once it's nice and dry, I've weighted it down just for a little while. At this point, it doesn't take all that long. I'm going to cut these corners off because this next stage is quite important. We don't want a great deal of fabric to start building up in the corners of our pieces. So when I glue this into place, I'm only going to have a little bit of fabric over here. We want to keep these corners nice and crisp and as smooth as possible as we go along. I'm going to put some glue right along that edge, right into the corners of that fabric. I'm going to do this side first, then I'm going to do the other side, and then I'll do the opposing sides in a minute. I want that to be nice and tailored. I don't want there to be a huge amount of fabric, and I don't want there to be a lot of folds and a lot of bulkiness. It's really important for all these little pieces to have nice, straight, tailored, crisp, sharp little corners. We'll do the other side here in the same way, and then when we come back over here, you can see right there, this corner is going to be nice and flat. So now we can come back to our outer layer of our pop-up wall, and exactly like you just finished the freestanding wall, do this in the very same way. As you can see, this is just this little corner, and I'm repeating myself because it's very important that there's very little fabric here, and you just fold it once and then back so that becomes nice and tailored. So now we're going to come back to our main frame, the centerpiece of your Magic Christmas box. Our floor is nicely stuck down, had lots of time to dry. Now I'm going to attach this back panel to the back side of this wall. Very simple. Do exactly the same thing. I always have a little damp cloth sitting next to me because I tend to get glue all over the place and on my fingers, and that's the nice thing, I can just wipe my fingers off. I'm just going to spread that fabric out nice and straight and lay that wall down against it. I don't want to stretch the fabric too much. The more I stretch at the fabric, the more it might cause my wall to buckle or bend. I want to be very careful that the wall doesn't bend or buckle. Now I'm going to lay this down and put a tile in it to weight it down maybe for about 20 minutes. It doesn't take long to dry, but when I come back to it, I'm going to stick this piece down, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to fold this flap of this fabric and glue it down against itself, and then when I lift that up into that corner, it'll just be nice and tailored at that back corner. So now that you're getting the hang of it, as you can see, I've gone ahead and glued down this back corner. Now, I just want to show you how to create this nice little tailored edge with this piece of fabric before we set it into place. I'm going to go ahead and cover this back side of this wall with a nice little buttering of my glue, not too wet, right up to this edge. And I also spread some glue just to the inside edge of this fabric. I'm going to glue that piece down there, and then I'm going to position this fabric straight along this back corner and just smooth it out. As you can see, I've already cut off the little bit of excess pieces up in these corners, getting them ready. And that's just nice and tailored along this back edge. So you can go ahead now and carry on folding down, wrapping inside all of these extra little bits that we've got around the outside edge. This is our floor. The one thing I want to bring your attention to is down here in this corner. That's why I haven't done this part. I want you to be very careful to keep it very, very nice and clean back here. Not too much extra fabric and extra glue and stuff all building up. We're going to attach that other interior wall that we've covered with interior wallpaper into this back corner. But also, this is our finished freestanding wall. I have a little arrow on it to help me remember which direction it goes. So when you're folding these pieces, when you're gluing all these edges around the corners, this one down here, make sure you have it nice and clean there, because when this wall has its little pop-up wall attached to it, it's going to need to slide nice and smoothly down the inside of this wall. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Make sure this stays nice and clean in here. So I went ahead and finished gluing down the other side of our interior wallpaper piece, and I weighted it down and I let it dry so that now I have this nice square piece. Right here where this fabric is, I'm just going to trim that almost to the wall, but not quite. And very much like you did with the other ones, working on one half at a time, you can just start gluing the edges together. Don't forget that you don't want there to be too much excess in the corner. I might sound like I'm repeating myself, and I'm sure that I am, but just push that little corner in, push that little corner in. When you wrap it around that way, there's not too much, so that when we glue this into the inner main frame of our box, it'll sit nice and flat against that wall. When you're finished with that, put it under your weights, books, soup cans, whatever you have, weight it down, let it dry. Same with this one here. We've just done the outside edge, and right around the corners here, they're nice and straight and flat. And so now that our inner wall wallpaper is all done, I'm going to finish assembling the pop-up wall. I like to position this right here at the edge of my work table so that the floor stays nice and square. I like that fold to be just like that. This is the outer layer of the pop-up wall, and we're just going to attach the two of them together. The only reason that I wanted to take the time to show this step to you is because once the subfloor is attached, we want the wall to stand up as straight and square as we can get it to be. So when you attach this piece to that piece, I want to make sure that right here along this bottom edge is nice and straight along there, so that when it's all nice and dry, after I've weighted it in place and let it dry thoroughly, and it's standing here, and we attach that subfloor to that pop-up wall, we want it to stand nice and straight. That's why that bottom edge needs to be nice and flat against the fold. So now we're going to wrap the top of our box. And once again, I'm just going to spread a nice thin coat. Now it may seem to you that our little video tutorial is jumping around a little bit from here to there and place to place and back and forth to walls and tops, and seems out of sequence. But that's just so you always have something to do in the meantime while certain pieces are drying. Turn that over. Make sure you smooth it out a little bit on this side. Just make sure there's no big bubbles or big creases in it. Lay it back down. And then we're going to create sections that are going to come up and down to the inside of this box. So what I'm going to do is just cut away these excess corner pieces, because we're not going to need all that excess fabric tucked down inside our box. So I've just gone ahead and covered that side of our box top, and I'll show you what I did. Right here in this corner, I've cut away, just sliced through that fabric right in there. And on the same on the other side, just like that. Paint this surface here and right down inside, right onto the inside of the box top. You'll see as I get to this point right here, I want to cut into that corner just a little bit, just like that, so that that can go around the corner. A little more glue right there, and around the corner like that, so I can keep it nice and tidy there in that corner. So we've got the two sides folded up and wrapped nicely. Now we're going to do the opposing edges. And very much like we did for the main frame of our box, we're going to fold this piece over and create a nice little tailored folded edge along there. But I also want to create a nice little folded tailored edge to go down the inside. But of course, we have to cut this corner also. So the first thing I want to do is just cut my fabric straight into that corner, right on that corner. I just want to glue that piece down onto itself in a nice straight line from that corner. So when I lift it up, it's going to lay right against that corner like that. The same for inside here. I want this piece. It's a little bit tricky. Be patient and gentle with it, and you'll see what I mean. We'll come back to that in a minute when we have the rest of the glue on here. I sort of have a good idea. It's right about there. I'm going to cut a little piece like that. Cut that little flap right out of there. I'll glue that little tab onto itself there. I'll be coming back to glue that little tab onto itself there. And now, with a little bit more water, just a little bit more water in my glue and right up along that edge, and also right down the inside here and right onto the floor of that box top. Fold that in right there. Fold that up. So that nice little tailored edge, it's not right exactly in the corner, that's okay. What we want to make sure is that it's not too bulky in those corners, because we want our lid to fit down over our box. Now we're ready to attach our freestanding walls to our main frame. Remember our little pinwheel design. This tab or overhang that sticks out a little bit on this edge is going to come up against the outside of this wall that's going to go on that side. Now, keeping that in mind, right here, this wall comes out a little bit past where this wall is going to stand. So it's going to stand up against here. We're going to position this wall into place, and its little overhanging side is going to come up on the outside of this edge, just like a pinwheel. Just keep that going all the way around. I'm using a little strip of our fabric as a hinge, and the reason for that is because that wall is going to open and close and open, close and open and close 100 times, million times. So I want a good amount of glue on both sides of where my little fabric hinge is going to end up. Good side down, because that's the side that's going to show hardly at all through that little tiny crack between that little corner. This is the only place I recommend giving this fabric just a little stretch. I'm going to pin either side of this fabric into place, and I'm really giving it a good pull across there. We want that wall, later on it's going to be covered in a subfloor and a carpeting and everything over top, but that's going to make the perfect little hinge right in there. And we're going to do the same thing to this one on the other side. Now that our lovely lid is nice and dry, you can see I've already started to attach the ribbon. So I'm going to show you how. I use this ribbon that has the little wire on the sides of it. I like it. I like the way it holds its shape when you make the little bow that goes on the top. I put that on separately. I find it easier. So the first thing I want to do is measure. I've marked little spots there. My box top is exactly 9 3/8 inches. So I want to find the center point, and I want to make some little marks for myself so that when I'm gluing my ribbon on, I make sure that it stays right in the middle. It's got to line up with the ribbon that I put on the sides of the box. So they have to all line up together. So once again, a little line of glue. What's interesting to me is that because this ribbon is made mostly of polyester, polyester fabric tends to absorb the glue, and the water in the glue, for some reason, tends to stain polyester fabric. On this particular ribbon, it's okay because it's got this sort of shadow effect that's going on in it anyway. I've already marked my little spots. Got this little center spot right there to guide me. I don't know about you, but I can't put that in a straight line unless I have those little guides. Let's move that down. Just keep going, tuck that in, glue it in, we're ready to go. Now that our ribbon is all snug and dried in there, we're going to put a nice little piece of felt to the inside of the box top, just to cover all those. The nice thing about felt is you can kind of push it around a little bit. So I'm just sort of stretching it a little bit into the corners, up against all sides. Turn that over. I've made the bow separately. I just find it easier. I'm going to put a great big blob of glue right there in the middle. Stick that little bow right in there. Stick some pins in it. All the way around it and let it dry. I've folded up the walls and actually pinned them into place for the moment, just so I can show you how to attach the ribbon to the outside of your main box. The reason I've waited to this point is because, as you can see, there's this little 3/16 of an inch wall attached here to the side of this wall. So if we had put our ribbon on the outside of this freestanding wall when it was not attached to the box, if we put it in the middle, it wouldn't end up in the middle, because now we have this extra little almost 1/4 of an inch. So now I want to take my ruler, my pencil, and it's 8.5 inches exactly, which gives me 4 1/4 in the middle. Now I'm going to put that ribbon in the center of that wall. I only attach the ribbon right to the bottom of that outside wall. It stands like this, basically. And I just bring the ribbon right down to the very bottom of that wall. I don't put it across the bottom of the box because these walls have to open and close, and we don't want anything in that little seam there that's going to inhibit that wall laying down flat when it's open. So that's why we're attaching the ribbon to this section now. Put that right on there. A couple of little pins to hold it into place at the bottom there. Right up and over, right up around the top. We'll glue this little piece down here, and that's done. And look at that. Your Magic Christmas box is really starting to take shape. You've got your ribbon all the way around, and now we're going to attach the inner wallpaper layer to the inside here. And don't forget, one side is just a little bit longer than the other, and that's so that it comes out to the edge of this little overlap piece. I'm just going to lay this whole thing down on its back. Spread a little buttering of glue, not too much water, to the inside there. Tuck that piece right into the corner. This is when you'll be glad you've taken the time to make sure that it's not too bulky on the edges. I'm just going to set some tiles, books, cans, whatever you want in there. Weight it down and let it dry. So great, you've gotten this far. You've attached all your ribbon all the way around the outside of the box. Now you're ready to attach the pop-up walls on the inside. And I'm going to show you how to do that. I've already gone ahead and attached this one. So you see, it stands up there nicely. So just to keep it out of the way, I'm going to stick a little pin into this wall just to hold it in place, just so it's not in our way. And we're going to attach this wall that we assembled earlier. And I'm going to make sure that it sits just perfectly right there. The main thing you want to remember when you're gluing this subfloor into place, you want to make sure that that wall can still fold up. So I can see that right there, nice straight line at the back because we've measured all our pieces nicely. We've got everything done properly ahead of time. And as you can see, I've also added some little decorative trim onto the tops of my walls. And I'll go into that in more detail in one of the little tips and tricks mini clips videos. So I want to line that up back here at the back side, right along that edge. So that looks just great. I'm going to put a tile there to hold it down. Now don't forget this other pop-up wall over here. We have that little 3/16 of an inch that sticks out at the back edge because that is the little overlap tongue that lines up to the outside edge. Just keep that in mind as you're working along here to make sure that when that box opens and closes. And later on, we're also going to attach a fireplace right here, which will hold that wall in place. So now that you've become a miniature interior designer, we've chosen our lovely wallpaper, we've chosen what we'd like to have trimmed at the top of the walls, give them a little bit of accent, a little bit of dimension. Now we're going to add the carpeting. I've chosen this beautiful piece of pink velvet for the bedroom, and that's because I have this lovely little bed that's going to go right here. You can learn more about how to make a bed in one of my tips and tricks videos. The other two rooms I'm going to cover in the same carpeting, but I'm not going to put a whole piece of fabric across this whole section. I wanted to do both rooms separately, and that's because where the wall folds up into place, the fabric will bunch and buckle right there, and it becomes challenging to work with. So I always do those two pieces separately. So you can just go ahead and start carpeting the floors. Now you'll notice that this wall has this nice little overlap or tab sticking out on the back side here so that it can lean against. And our wall over here doesn't have that, so it's a little bit floppy. And that's why having a fireplace to sit right here actually gives this wall its structure and stability. So I almost always put a little fireplace in here. This one I made myself. I have other options. There's this lovely little one that I think it's made out of marble or stone, and I find it's a little too sort of small. There's this one, which is a beautiful wooden fireplace, and quite honestly, to me, it's just a little too big. So I usually make my own. And if you'd like to learn how to make a fireplace, go to my tips and tricks mini clip about fireplaces. And I haven't quite finished the top of my fireplace because I'm also creating a lovely little gingerbread house display that's going to sit on the top of the fireplace. You can learn how to make one of those too.